BBC1, hold on tight. All beacon feathers, the generation game at 6:10. This week in the safe hands of Jim Davidson. Pressing all the right buttons, Noel and Blobby. And hey, it's good to talk. Live at 8, the draw for the National Lottery. The jackpot this...
C4 concludes at 9. It's time to come clean.
We love each other, or we hate each other, I don't know, it's the same thing.
She has a friend.
Ruby's guests at 10:05. Carrie Fisher and Eddie Izzard.
I am never, ever coming back.
The Way It Is, Sunday on BBC One.
Continuing his rise to stardom, Jed's taking his talents to the USA and the home of country music in 10 minutes in Jimmy Nail's Crocodile Shoes. This is BBC One. Now, a budget response by the Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman, Malcolm Bruce.
Well, what did this week's budget do for you and for your family? Not much seems to be most people's answer. This week the Chancellor tried to portray himself as prudent and cautious. The truth is, he's presiding over the biggest tax rise in history and leaving us all worse off. When I talk to people around the country, they ask me the same sort of question. Will things change so that I can keep my job? When will things change so that I can get a job? When will the future be a little more predictable and secure for myself and my family? This week, the government failed to give answers to any of those vital questions. They delivered instead a budget designed to take money off you now to give some of it back in tax cuts just before the next election. Prudence now, profligacy later. But what about all that government talk about helping the unemployed? What do the extra proposals in the budget amount to? Frankly, gimmickry, not substance. There are 1 million long-term unemployed people in Britain today, so why on earth is the sensible plan to cut national insurance contributions to be limited to those who have been unemployed for over 2 years, and even then delayed for another 18 months? What else should Mr. Clarke have done? Well, he should have stopped the extra 9.5% VAT on domestic fuel. He could have done it, he had the money, he chose not to. The Liberal Democrats are committed not just to stopping the extra VAT, but to reducing it to 5%. Next week in Parliament, we'll be trying to force the government to change its mind on VAT. But what's the outlook for the wider economy? Well, last week Mr. Clarke proclaimed, "I do not think I could have imagined a better economic background." That's not what Conservative Party Deputy Chairman John Maples wrote secretly to John Major recently, saying, "While we trumpet the recovery, the voters do not think that the recession has ended. We will have had 4 or even 5 years with no rise in living standards." Mr. Clarke is hoping that you'll forget about the 7 further tax rises only just beginning to take effect. These will raise taxes by the equivalent of 3 pence more on the basic rate. But it's not just the extra taxes that are going to cost. It's Mr. Clarke's rejection of the Liberal Democrat call for a budget for the long term, for investment in education, skills, industry, and improving the environment, which is the budget that the country really needs. In fact, the government has taken the axe to investment on the training budget, on public housing, and by squeezing local authorities. The roads budget was also cut. Fine, but why wasn't the money put into public transport? And what about education? What does it say about the government's commitment to our future when they will not even invest in our young people? This budget cuts our future education expenditure. And to Liberal Democrats, that's madness. We would make education the nation's top priority. You know, here in the centre of London, we're at the heart of a great trading nation. Today there are still some world-class companies throughout Britain, but not enough of them for us to keep up with, let alone surpass our major competitors. Our economy is finally recovering. Exports are up, inflation is low. That's all welcome. And public borrowing is lower than forecast, largely because the Chancellor got his figures wrong last year, and because lower unemployment saves money, as we've always argued. But can recovery last? The truth is that there is just no sign that Britain's economic problems have been resolved. Growth since 1979 has averaged just over 1.5% per year, compared with over 2.5% over the previous 30 years. And look at what this has done to jobs. Unemployment, having been at a relatively low level for many decades, has since 1979 reached record levels and stayed high. And even though the unemployment level has recently been going down, the number of jobs, people in employment, has been falling, not rising. Manufacturing output is barely higher than it was 20 years ago, and manufacturing investment is lower now than it was in 1979. And while we have stood still or lost ground, our main industrial competitors have raced ahead, substantially increasing their investment. Look what's been squandered. Since 1979, the government have enjoyed a tax windfall of £118 billion from North Sea oil and another £77 billion from privatising state assets. £195 billion extra in total. But where did all this money go? Wasted on paying to keep more people than ever before in unemployment. Unemployment costs of £225 billion have wiped out the entire windfall and left the government with an overdraft. That's why taxes have shot up, an extra £1,150 per year for the average family, or 8 pence more on the basic rate of tax. We can only have sustainably lower taxes if we invest first. So how would we tackle our country's economic problems? Well, last week the Liberal Democrats set out our solution in our alternative budget, costed, prioritised and disciplined. It shows what could be done without raising taxes any further for the vast majority of people who are now paying quite enough tax already. Our budget would have been about action. Action for long-term investment, action for skills and jobs, action for the environment, and action for sustaining prosperity. These are our priorities. The first priority must be investment in education, public transport, and industry. Of these programs, investment in education is key. High-quality education is absolutely vital if we're to compete with the highly skilled workforces of other industrial economies. And only the Liberal Democrats are making this commitment. By improving education, we help ourselves to address our next priority, skills and jobs. Liberal Democrats are committed to high-quality training and retraining. We would also introduce a scheme, not in 18 months' time, but now, to assist the long-term unemployed, and we would help with childcare. And there is one more way in which we would boost employment. It's about cutting taxes on employment and income and switching them onto taxing pollution instead. Let me explain. Pollution is already rising to unacceptable levels. There are now, for example, 3 million people in the UK suffering from asthma. We should tackle pollution by reducing taxes on the things we want, employment and income, and increasing them on the things we don't want, pollution and overdevelopment. It makes sense. Liberal Democrats can be trusted to make these investments because we are determined to be honest with you on taxation. You'll know what you're getting from us. Voters have a right to expect honesty. Finally, we need action for sustaining prosperity, a stable environment in which business and individuals can plan for the future with confidence and without fear of the usual roller coaster of taxes and interest rates. That's why we'll take the politics out of interest rates to make sure inflation stays low. And we'll make a clear commitment to work with Europe so that we can shape and influence its future rather than jeering unconstructively and ineffectively from the sidelines. You know, the Chancellor delivered a pretty upbeat message on Tuesday, but I doubt that his confidence is shared around the country. The people I see fear for their jobs today. They're worried about taxes and interest rates that are constantly bouncing around. They're shocked by the crime wave and uncertain about what the future may bring. But don't just take my word for it. Take the confidential words of the Conservative Deputy Chairman John Maples in a note to the Prime Minister. He said, "There is a feeling of powerlessness and insecurity about jobs, housing, the health service, business, family values, crime, and no vision of where we are heading." John Maples is right. It's a shame John Major didn't listen to him. If he had, perhaps this budget would have been different. The kind of budget we would like to deliver. A budget for education and skills, a budget to tackle unemployment, a budget against pollution, a budget for long-term investment. This is the only way to secure our future. Good night.
That was a budget response by the Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman Malcolm Bruce. It'll be shown again at 10:30 on BBC2. Revealing more of the country's hidden past, Forbidden Britain on BBC2 in just over 5 minutes documents tragic cases of sexual abuse.
A truck driver hijacked in Wales, threatened with a gun, dumped in the back of his lorry, blindfolded for 9 hours. Crime Watch has details of the gang. and the burglar alarm that brought help too late for Kathleen Hempsall, the Lincolnshire midwife murdered as she got home. Crime Watch has descriptions of someone running from the scene. Maybe you can help. Crime Watch UK is tomorrow at 10 on BBC One.
BBC1 brings you the 67th Royal Variety Performance.
Go on, tell me you didn't like that.
I wanna cry, wanna croon, I wanna laugh like a loon. It's that old devil moon deep in your eyes.
Saturday, 8:05 on BBC1.
Heading for the home of country music now on BBC One, Jed's going transatlantic as Jimmy Nail stars in Crocodile Shoes.
We're going to get you